I'm grateful to the Backbench Business Committee and to the many colleagues cross-party who've supported today's important debate about tackling the energy trilemma. It is perhaps the most critical issue facing us today. Putin's invasion of Ukraine highlighted the extraordinary pressure on the energy systems of countries right across the world and also demonstrated the crucial importance of energy sovereignty. For us in the UK, although the risk to security of supply remains low, the Russian invasion has demonstrated like never before the importance of balance in tackling the energy trilemma. We can think of the energy trilemma as a bit like a three-legged stool, whose three equally important legs are first, keeping the lights on, second, keeping the cost of energy bills down, and third, decarbonising right across the world. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, in order to sit comfortably on that three-legged stool, all three legs must be in balance and given equal consideration. And achieving this balance is by no means an easy task. And as chairman of the 1922 Backbench Committee on Bays, along with a number of colleagues, in particular my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, who is vice chairman of the committee and in her place today, and also the noble Lord Lilly, the vice chairman of the committee from the other place, across our two houses we've been looking in detail at the practical steps needed to meet this enormous challenge. Now, the government is, I know, already working hard to tackle the energy trilemma. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, there's a great deal more that government already has in hand, to which a shove here and a push there could make a huge and positive difference in very short order to consumers, to businesses and to our decarbonisation efforts. So in our recent report called Energy Market Reform, Tackling the Energy Trilemma, our committee made 34 recommendations. These include unblocking renewables, cutting energy demand, improving the flexibility of energy pricing, looking at the future of the energy price guarantee, and also creating a new energy department in Whitehall. So I was very pleased to see the Prime Minister came to the same conclusion as the committee and has created the new Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. And I'm sincerely hoping that we will be as successful with our other 33 recommendations. So I'm keen to use this debate today to make the case to ministers. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, there is no doubt the UK has been a world leader in deploying renewable energy projects from almost a standing start in 2010. By 2020, solar and wind produced nearly 30% of the UK's electricity, a tenfold increase on 2010. And the UK is proud to have almost half the world's offshore deployed wind, all created under successive Conservative governments, a great record of commitment that we can point to. However, renewable energy projects now face increasing bottlenecks, including delays in the planning system, delays to grid connections, shortages in supply chains, and a creaking electricity market design. In addition, there's an increasing risk of skills shortages as the deployment of offshore wind in particular ramps up this decade. To tackle these problems, government should consider a number of things that should already be in hand. First is speeding up the planning system by straight away implementing the new National Policy Statement for Renewables, something which has been good to go since 2011 and which would provide much greater investability. In particular, the concern over developers reserving grid connections and allowing years to pass without using them means that vital housing and infrastructure projects cannot go ahead because they can't get a grid connection. Second, government should consider officially committing to the development of an offshore ring main for offshore wind. Although some projects are already sharing infrastructure, clear guidance from government would speed it up and make it much more acceptable to communities who don't want the huge onshore infrastructure that's currently being pushed onto their beaches and sensitive onshore conservation areas. Third, the government could immediately issue direction on where new power lines should be located. Overhead lines are much cheaper, but less acceptable to communities. Underground lines, on the other hand, are potentially 6 times more expensive. There is a lack of clarity on policy in this critical area, and particularly because to meet our 2030 targets for electrifying our energy system, independent analysis has concluded that the national grid will need to build 7 times as much infrastructure over just the next 7 years as we have achieved in total over the last 32 years. A huge mountain to climb. Fourth, although there has been progress on floating offshore wind projects, the government should take seriously the evidence that floating offshore wind, particularly on Britain's west coast, could strengthen our energy security. This could improve electricity resources in Northern Ireland, as well as provide a hedge against low wind speed around other parts of the British Isles. I'm happy to give way.
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for giving way, because she's making excellent points here. She served as Energy Minister, I think, and I'm reminded that maybe the best part of 20 years ago, one of her predecessors as Energy Minister, Brian Wilson, was promoting the case of an interconnector to go down the west coast of the United Kingdom through the Irish Sea then. That didn't happen, essentially, because of concerns in Ofgem around the danger of stranded asset. So I think her idea is a good one, but does she agree with me that in order to achieve it, there is going to have to be a fundamental rethink about the way in which we regulate the industry?
Well, I think the Right Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right. Of course, regulation, safety, considering the impact of potential for stranded assets is absolutely vital. I don't think, in terms of interconnectors, that there should be any fundamental objections to expanding the use of interconnectors, but what I'm talking about here is specifically the potential for floating offshore wind, which I think is huge potential and something that's not yet being deployed here in the UK. Fifth, I think the government should stop paying offshore wind farms in Scotland for switching off when it's too windy, already costing bill payers billions every year. Instead, we should be looking at piloting local electricity pricing to encourage producers to work with business and consumers to use more electricity when it's plentiful and to reduce usage or to use stored energy when the wind stops. This could be valuable for everyone, from Scottish citizens accessing cheap electricity when the wind is blowing to Cornish residents who can do likewise when the sun is shining. Local electricity pricing offers the transformational change that would make much better sense of the successful deployment of so many renewables. One key recommendation made by the Bays Committee is how to make renewable projects more acceptable to local communities. Local referendums, together with local compensation, caused a bit of a stir when we announced it, but Mr Deputy Speaker, it has a lot of merit. In short, the report recommends that any proposed onshore wind, solar or shale gas extraction project should be subject to local referendum on the basis of a simple majority. Where 50% plus of those who vote are in favour, the project can then go to normal planning considerations, but without the prospect of being overturned for lack of local support. In return for the community accepting this limit to individual objections, our report proposes that local residents should receive free or subsidised energy bills for the entire lifetime of the project. This would have the effect of encouraging local communities, but also forcing developers to think twice before locating renewables too close to sensitive communities because of the impact on the financial viability of their project. At the same time, bearing in mind the need for an urgent increase in the amount of electricity infrastructure, the committee recommends that the national grid should be encouraged to build new pylons alongside transport corridors, and that renewables developers should be encouraged to locate alongside them with the resulting cheaper grid connections. The second area for investigation in our report was how to cut energy demand. Every unit of energy that isn't used is one that doesn't have to be generated. This reduces carbon emissions, cuts the cost of energy to consumers and businesses, and improves our energy security, a genuine triple win. Ever since the committee's first report in April 22, we've been recommending a wide range of energy-saving actions, and here are just a few of them. First, that boiler installers should not only focus on safety as they do at present, but should also consider efficiency. Every boiler installation should only provide sufficient power to heat that particular home or business, and the temperature gauge should be set at the most efficient level. Second, the completion of the smart meter rollout should be prioritised and the move to half-hourly pricing brought forward to put control into the hands of consumers through smart tariffs. They can then choose to wash clothes, cook or charge their car when energy is cheap, and likewise, businesses can plan their energy use around cheaper periods. This could have a big impact on flattening the overall daily peaks in energy demand, with a massive benefit to energy security and cost. It would then make sense to regulate for white goods to be smart as standard, to automate the way in which customers can take advantage of cheaper price windows. Third, the report proposed that government should bring forward enforcement of the new home standards and should also expand the Eco4 scheme to insulate more cold homes, which would offer far better value for taxpayers than our current policy of subsidising the heating for homes that are drafty. We also recommend that an organisation modelled on Home Energy Scotland should be introduced in England to provide better advice and support to households. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, an area where the committee feels government policy has taken a wrong turn is with the energy cap itself. It was a well-intentioned policy that was intended to stop customers being ripped off by their energy supplier if they didn't switch provider often enough. However, the current energy crisis has exposed major flaws in the operation of the cap. Because the cap is below the true cost of supplying energy, almost all customers are now on capped tariffs, together with extremely costly additional taxpayer subsidies. This has killed the market for switching between energy suppliers, but has also exacerbated the bankruptcy of those energy suppliers. The report recommends, firstly, a thorough review of the energy price cap. Secondly, that the green levies on energy bills should be permanently moved to general taxation in order to take away some of the regressive nature of levies on energy bills. And third, a more targeted system for energy bills should be introduced. One specific proposal worth consideration is a cap on a basic amount of electricity per household that then exposes households to the full unsubsidised costs of energy once they go above that basic level of usage. Fourthly, our report recommends a new requirement on energy suppliers to offer long-term fixed-price energy deals to consumers and businesses so that they can have the budgeting certainty that so many already achieve through taking out a fixed-rate mortgage for their home or their building. Fifth, the energy regulator Ofgem must shoulder much of the blame for supplier failures. Financial regulation of energy suppliers has been far too weak, and the government should direct Ofgem to implement banking-style financial stability requirements to avoid a repeat of recent history, whereby an energy supplier can make money when energy costs are below the cap and then go bust if energy costs rise above the cap, leaving all bill payers to pick up the tab. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, to conclude, whilst I do congratulate the government on creating the new Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, yes, I will give way to my honourable friend.
Before she concludes, there are days when the renewables fail. And when that happens, we have to buy electricity in, particularly from Belgium and places like that. So should the government not be expanding on what they've started, and that's looking at nuclear, which she hasn't mentioned, particularly in the urgency with small nuclear reactors. The government's looking at one type of small nuclear reactor. There are two. Should we not be encouraging the government to move into that field fast?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for raising the issue of nuclear. I'm a huge supporter of both small modular reactors and advanced modular reactors. I think they offer massive potential for baseload energy here in the UK, absolutely crucial. And whilst there aren't recommendations in this particular backbench report, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. But Mr Speaker, to conclude, I do congratulate the government on creating the new Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. There's no doubt that having a specific focus on tackling the energy trilemma is vital if we are to meet our goal of leading the world in tackling global climate change whilst building secure and affordable energy sources at home. Thank you.